What up, y'all? It's your boy Purely Def, your favorite Def rapper. I'm gonna do something a little bit different today, but not really that much different. I wanna talk about Charlie Clips versus Serius Jones. This is it's kind of a scheme, it's kind of not, but it's a very well-known segment of his first round with Serius Jones. So I'll go ahead and play it and then we can talk about it after.
That means be out, nigga. You said you was a runaway and that Mook was a house, nigga. Well, before you run away, let me take a trip through your house, nigga. Let's see if y'all can guess which room I'm in. I'ma give you and your boys hints. I'ma shower you with some bars to leave you and your boys pissed. I start shooting up your car. You better sink when I'm getting that toy lit. Cause when it's 9, take a dump, you won't get to enjoy shit. Now y'all know what room I'm in. So I can throw the check in his mouth, kill his piece of shit in the bathroom, and then drag him through the rest of the house. Now you know what room I'm in? You don't know? Well, here's a little reminder. I could shoot your sister, but I'ma let my arm rest and have this right hook recliner. I'm comfortable like a love seat. When I'm strapped with 2 arms, I pull out and make everybody sleep. It's like a futon. I told your uncle, Yo, I told his uncle to move on. But he ain't move, he took the thug route. So for lamping too long, I got my clap on and blew his bulb out. Now you know what room I'm in? Now I'm gonna throw the tech in your mouth. Since nobody living in that room, let me drag you through the rest of the house. Me and your aunt had an encounter. I grabbed her by her hair, I was getting ready to off it. The sink was running hot, but I ain't really wanna force it. I grabbed that knife, I thought about having my hand. I said, me and your aunt had an encounter. I grabbed her by her head, I was getting ready to off it. The sink was running hot, but I ain't really want to force it. I thought about grabbing a knife, having my hand poking her, but why when I could draw and just have this can opener? I said, now y'all know what room I'm in. I could throw the tech in his mouth. Your house too small. I can't go through the rest of your house.
So basically everything you see highlighted here is kind of part of what I will call a scheme. And I use that term loosely because there are different parts that feel like a scheme, and then there are different parts where he's really just punching. So the reason I kind of brought this up is because, number one, I kind of wanted to talk about the differences between schemes and punchlines, which I will probably never do again, just because it is a very fundamental thing. If people, want that content, I'm happy to talk about it at more detail. But I tend to think that most people in battle rap can kind of tell the difference between a scheme and a punchline. The way I kind of recently started thinking about the differences between a scheme and a punchline is that schemes are normally going to have the double entendre within a word. So you're basically peppering in different words, and those words are the double entendre. Again, looking at the beginning segment right here, I'ma shower you with bars and leave you pissed. Like, there's no connection there. Like, he's not saying he's going to literally pee on him. Arguably a pause moment right there, but that's because there is no connection between these two ideas. He's just peppering in different words that we associate with being in a bathroom. Shower, piss, toilet, sink. But there's really not any connection between one item and the other. Here's a great example. You better sink when I'm getting the toilet. If you think about it from the context of a bathroom, it doesn't mean anything to say you better sink. A sink is a thing that you wash your hands in. Nobody says, oh, your hands are dirty, you better sink. And likewise, it doesn't really mean anything when he says, I'm getting that toilet. It does mean something when you're talking about a gun and calling a gun a toy and the gun is getting lit in terms of the double entendre where he's using buzzwords related to a bathroom. It doesn't really mean anything when he says, I'm getting that toilet. Whereas a punchline, the double meaning is the entire phrase, not just one word. Usually in a punchline, you have an entire phrase that will be sort of a misdirection. And if you saw my introduction video to this whole series where I talk about X like Y, that X like Y format is a traditional punchline. But when I think of, a very traditional basic scheme, it would be something like this segment of lines here, where basically all you have are different buzzwords that kind of get peppered into the bars that you're writing. I think it could be argued that this line right here is technically a punch. Again, if you were to go back to my original introduction video where I talk about X like Y punchlines, I could reword this in a way to say something like the 9 taking a dump like I'm enjoying a shit. I hate the way that that sounds, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to reword it like this and say the 9 taking a dump like I gave it X-lax. And of course, if you've been doing this a long time, you're probably going to see the word X-lax, and immediately the first thing that comes to your mind is maybe that can be turned into a double meaning as well. So you could say something like my X-lax blah blah blah, or something else roughly like that where you're trying to give X-lax a second meaning. But I digress. But I think in this context, I do feel like it's a little bit simple, but I do consider this to be a punchline. But when I read this line the way that I would read a normal punchline, basically the X would be the 9's taking a dump, and the Y is you won't get to enjoy shit. And if you recall from my intro video, every X has 2 different meanings. The first meaning would be that he's dumping a gun. The second meaning, that's not really that clear. Mainly because of this word right here, the 9 is taking a dump. We know that when we're talking about a punchline, he's talking about his gun. But if we're talking about him in the bathroom, what is the 9? What I have seen done a lot of times in battle rap is people will use the 9 as a synonym for a person who is 9 or a child who is 9. But even when you give it that context, it doesn't really fully make sense. A 9-year-old is taking a dump. You won't get to enjoy your shit, I guess. I don't know. I just feel like it's too much of a reach to try to justify why this is a punchline. So in my mind, this entire segment right here is a scheme. Moving on, there is a little bit of filler here. Then he moves on into the next room. And actually, all 3 of these lines right here, I would consider to be more of a punchline than a scheme. So really, he's combining schemes with punchlines. But it still kind of all comes together like one big scheme because he's still throwing out all of these buzzwords that people associate with different rooms. Obviously, armrest, love seat, futon, but he's kind of blurring the lines between having a traditional scheme and having a traditional punchline. And likewise, I would probably consider this to also be a punchline. Then again, he has quite a bit of filler here. There is one double meaning right here where he was talking about the living room in this segment right here. So he's saying nobody's living in that room. But then he goes back to this part right here, which is a little bit more scheme. So then he comes back to this part right here, which is the bit about the kitchen. This again is more of a scheme. He's saying I didn't want to force it or force it. I'll say the way he delivers it is a lot better than the way I can deliver it with my accent. But for him, it kind of works. But I consider this part right here to be a scheme because there's not really a double meaning within the faucet. The double meaning is really just this particular word. He just happens to be listing things that are in the kitchen. I will say that I feel like Clips had more of an opportunity to kind of resolve all this and make it a little bit more obvious as to why he did this. If you watch the entire battle, he has this whole scheme about like, guess what room I'm in? Guess what room I'm in? And then toward the end, he just kind of leaves it. For me, I feel like it's building up to a big moment that kind of never happened. The big moment is that he had a scheme with lots of different buzzwords in it. That and having, some good punches within the mix. Now, the thing about this entire scheme that is a little bit unique that pretty much no other battlers really have done is that he basically tries to make people guess what he's rapping about. He does give them clues, but then he tries to make it their job to kind of infer from those clues what he's talking about. I think if you've been doing it for a very long time, again, I'm somebody that's been doing this for 22 plus years. I've never really been a big fan of schemes, but we are all very, very familiar with household items and things that we typically associate with being in certain rooms. He could have said something about a toaster, and 99 out of 100 times he would probably be talking about the kitchen. And that is really the technique that I wanted to draw attention to for this episode. Because like every episode I make, this is all something that can be reusable. You don't have to do a scheme about household items. At the very core of what all this material is, he's doing a scheme about closely related subjects. If I wanted to, I could take this entire idea, move it to a school. What classroom am I in? I got the scissors with the glue, maybe something about paper. I mean, let's be real, it's 2024. Anybody could just Google a list of art room items. Paper is a double meaning for money. Brushes, you could have a brush with death. Pastels, talking about your past losses. And this is why I don't like schemes, because to me, this is too easy. You can't do this with a punchline. You could do this with a scheme. Anytime. Like if I want to do a scheme about different brands of candy, all I have to do is Google it and bam, I can find about 100 different brands of candy. Ring pops, I let the gun ring pop. I'll pull up to your crib for a payday. I'll drive off with 100 grand. I'll open your neck like a Pez dispenser. You can get this bullet now or later. I got a bullet for you nerds. And even I got 4 bars for you candy rappers like a Kit Kat, which is something that Hollow actually said to Clips in order to make fun of, kind of how predictable some of these schemes can be. But one thing that I feel like makes this entire scheme very unique is the fact that he kind of turns it into a guessing game. And that is the kind of overall battle rap technique that I want to highlight, because what he did is more than just, a simple scheme. A simple scheme, in my opinion, would have been if he had done, these 4 lines basically throughout this entire thing. But he added in an extra element of, punching throughout. And then he also added in this kind of sectioning of different parts of his material. 1 minute he's talking about the living room, 1 minute he's talking about the bathroom, 1 minute he's talking about the kitchen. But at the same time, all of those things are tied to each other. And that kind of comes together to create what I think is a much more impressive body of work when you actually look at the different layers that are being kind of thrown in. There's actually a song that this kind of reminds me of by Elzhi called The Guessing Game. I definitely recommend you check it out if you've never heard it. But Elzhi does this kind of interesting thing that you could probably apply to a rap battle if you wanted to. But here's a very simple example. He says, "My head gets light when I'm catching a buzz," but he adds a pause in there that's basically meant for the listener to try to fill in the blank of what is supposed to follow. So there is one meaning in here saying that, I caught a buzz and my head got light, but there's also the double meaning, basically saying I got a buzz cut and because of that my head was lighter, basically saying the weight of his hair is no longer there. And he kind of does that all throughout the track. Definitely recommend you check that out. And Elzhi is a phenomenal lyricist, in my opinion, one of the most underrated to ever do it. But coming back to the scheme that Charlie Clips did, the reusable part of it that I wanted to talk about was really just this nature of turning it into kind of a guessing game. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a guessing game. It's more so that he never explicitly tells people, oh, I'm going to be talking about a bathroom. I'm going to be talking about a kitchen. I'm going to be talking about a living room. So there are many ways to take that overall idea and basically try to apply it to different things. For example, you can imagine maybe I write an entire scheme based on different rap battle leagues. So rather than tell you, oh, I'm about to rap about King of the Dot, you can try to leave some air of mystery out there to be like, there was a league, and then say some stuff about Pat Stay and Holohan and people that you would associate with King of the Dot. And likewise, you could do the same thing for RBE, for URL. I do think there is a lot of potential in rapping about one thing, then another thing, and then another thing, and all 3 of those things are closely related to each other. But all the while, you do it while leaving some kind of mystery as to exactly what you're talking about, but not so much mystery that people can't figure out what it is. If people figure out what it is early, they'll be with you on the first part, they'll be with you on the second part, and then be with you on the third part. Then that also gives you the ability to do a reveal at the very end. But the entire time, if you've been keeping, mystery after mystery, you can get to the point at the end where it finally gets to a climax and it actually reveals, okay, this is what you thought it was all along, or something like that. But that type of build-up, I think, has a lot of potential for, being a haymaker and possibly, if it's done well, being something that guarantees you that you win that entire round. But it all comes down to how it is being executed and whether it is executed correctly. I'm not saying you need to do a scheme about different leagues or a scheme about different objects, or maybe you want to turn it into like a Harry Potter scheme. You could be naming different people in Gryffindor, different people in Hufflepuff, etc. A scheme about Harry Potter is definitely not unique. But what would be unique is if somebody did a scheme about Harry Potter while leaving it up to them to fill in the blank about what it is you're actually talking about. And that is something that is unique to this segment, which is why I think it actually stands out more than the 99% of schemes that you tend to hear. Anyhow, like always, I encourage you to watch Charlie Clips versus Serius Jones on the URL YouTube, or subscribe to their application. And that's all I got for this episode.